Hello, welcome to another podcast. We got Kalani and a new guest, Cal, to our humble podcast. And today we're talking about the end of the world. I'm just kidding.
Armageddon is coming. This is fine.
No. AKA, it's the U.S. election right now. The time is 8:17 in California at the moment. We're at a nail-biting moment in politics at them right now, to say it very lightly. So I'm your host, Bryan. So thank you for being on this podcast with us. And I hope you like and subscribe. And we're just going to get right in it. So today is going to be very informal, just like a normal Kalani and Bryan podcast, but where we're going to talk in depth a little bit about the politics. A reminder, we're not political strategists by any stretch of the form or political analysts in any stretch of form, but I figured this might be an interesting conversation to have because this is just three voters with three different probably ideas behind the individuals we voted for. So let's start. so Cal, you're Callie, right? Sorry.
Well, it doesn't matter. Callan, it doesn't
Callie,
matter.
Cal. All right. A lot of C and K names around.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah, we do have a lot of C.
Amongst all our friends, yeah, a lot of C's and A's. So you're from West, and you've recently you moved about a year ago, right? I believe.
Yeah, a little bit more. July. Well, June is when we left, but yeah.
And I know, like it's said before, we're not political analysts, but we're just going to talk about surface area stuff. But
Right.
how do you feel about moving from the Midwest to the West Coast? Has it been a weird transition politically, or has it? Do you feel like any different now that you're in California?
Illinois. Before I moved out here, I actually lived in Chicago, like the city proper. And Illinois itself is like a mostly blue state, but it's a lot like California in that like it's always going to vote blue, but there's a lot of red areas. And it's funny because, I mean, it's not funny, but the other day I was looking up, there's a website, Sundown Towns.
Oh, yeah. I know about that, Sundown Towns.
Yeah, so there's a website that like will tell you where all of them are in the United States, so, like where they've been, if they're still active and stuff like that. And I looked them up just out of curiosity, and the entire county that Frankie and I used to live in was considered like a sundown county, which I was just like, okay, like I didn't expect that, but we did live in a mostly like really white area, but like for me in Illinois, and obviously like saying this as a white person, so I don't experience a lot of dodgy sort of situations, like people don't bring political stuff to me, but I mostly knew like Democrat liberal type people, being a young person too helps.
Yeah.
But I went to a really blended, well, when I was growing up, I went to a really like white school. But after like fourth grade, I went to really blended schools and had a lot of like mixed culturally and like racially diverse friends. So moving out to California is like definitely more liberal because it's California, but it's not such a big difference coming from Illinois and like the area where I lived. At least I'm sure there's lots of places in Illinois who would be like, no, this is like, we're super red here, like we love Trump, but I don't know, for me mostly it's not too different.
I for those that don't know what we're saying about sundown towns and haven't gotten the opportunity to watch the Lovecraft country, sundown towns are when basically once the sun is down, people of color has to stay tend to stay home, or
get out of town.
Or else sort of connotation. I never realized that was so as growing up in California, there's like certain education standards, and of course, one of them being like you get to learn about the Spanish colonial history and stuff like that. But stuff like the
Yeah.
civil rights too kind of glossed over. You only learned about the political leaders, and like even then, Malcolm X is barely even mentioned.
Yeah.
So, and the idea of sundown towns, right? That Jim Crow era sort of law, but barring people of color to be out and about in white areas, that was basically a way to kind of keep people in check, especially in the people of color areas.
Yeah.
Getting into white towns and like settling in those areas. So, yeah. Just for a little context about what we're talking about, because I figure most of our viewers that've seen this show are either Californian or Nevada's residents, so they probably don't have that same racial context. And also remember this: during the civil rights movement, it wasn't just a north-south issue. Like there was some like really screwed up stuff happening in the north too.
Yeah.
Like you just mentioned, sundown towns.
Yeah. There was actually sundown towns. I looked at the list for California too, and most of it is Asian oriented because a lot of Asian people in California, and we did a lot of messed up stuff to Asian people in the past. And two of the ones I found interesting were Arcadia and Monterey Park, because at some point in time for each one, obviously sometime in the 1800s, both of them expelled their Chinese population, I think. So I was like, like to compare where I came from, that type of sundown town to the type of sundown town that would be out here was just like really interesting to think about. Just it's so different, like racially and geographically. Like there's not a ton of Asian people in Illinois, like we're smack in the middle of the United States. Nobody wants to live there. But,
yeah. I was gonna mention that was the interesting thing, because the individual that I had on the podcast this past Monday, she's Asian American. She's from Illinois, and she was talking about how much being out here in California really changed, her perception of being Asian. Like she never really explored that and like that idea or that identity, and I was just like, oh, I never realized that, because I'm so kind of sheltered in this kind of like, at best I also am in Nevada because of family, and even then we kind of have like a little circle of like family and friends out there that are of Asian descent too. So it's kind of a little sheltered, a little bit.
I feel like this area is
I
kind
tell
of
Frankie
like
that all the time. Sorry.
no, it's like a bubble here. I think like once you leave, you kind of like have a different experience. Even leaving just like this area of Monterey Park is like, once you get out of there and you go up north to Northern California, you already have like an entirely different experience compared to over here.
And
sure.
Oh, sorry.
It's a party. Technical difficulties. It's John C.
How is it? I mean, when we moved back out here, like, I think Frankie like realized. He always said that, like, we lived in this place called Lombard and Downers Grove, and they're very white areas. You couldn't get like that. We had like one like pan Asian restaurant together, and it's so different. I just never realized how
It's very different.
I was like, wow, this is a lot more culture. I definitely prefer it here just because there's not just it's pretty boring where we lived, so it's like it's different out here. And I think like he realizes going from here to there and coming back, like it's a good experience for people to have to leave California and like leave LA and the SGV area, because it gives you a renewed perspective on everything.
For sure.
You appreciate a lot more too.
Do you feel like when you moved over here, you had like any shell shock moments? Like when you came here, you're just like, oh, I didn't expect this, but okay.
The first time I experienced an earthquake.
Oh yeah, I remember
Not that I
that.
didn't know about earthquakes, but I didn't. I had no concept, like I had no ability to conceptualize what it would be like. Um, and people would be like the first time I experienced it was like 4th of July last year, and the first one we were in DTLA, and everyone was like, "Oh, it felt like an earthquake," and we had been standing for like 6 hours because we were like in line outside of Expo, and everyone was like, "Oh, it feels like an earthquake," and I was like, "I do not know what you're talking about right now." But then the next day, I was sitting down outside, and like the earth started to move. And like this, like my brain couldn't like reconcile, like the entire, like everything in front of me was like rocking back and forth, and I was just like, this is different.
This is what death feels like. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I was like, this is not okay. No, I was really scared. And then the recent one we had too, like it was happening and my phone was going off at the same time. So I looked at my phone and it was like earthquake happening, and I was like, thank you for letting me know. Because otherwise I would be very confused right now. But it's so scary. Like it's, if you've not ever experienced one before and you're like a full grown adult by the time you experience one, it's such a weird experience.
I am sure there's probably aren't there like tornadoes that happen in Illinois?
We
Or
have tornadoes, we have blizzards, we have there have been earthquakes in Illinois, but I think they're like central Illinois because I've never experienced one.
that's
we
where all
have,
the
like-
fracking's happening. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, something's going on in central Illinois. No, but we have like normal meteorological things that you can like kind of prepare for usually.
Yeah,
So
I remember.
earthquakes are-
I remember that one year you and Frankie, the polar vortex was happening, and then I don't know why we did this. This is like everybody we know is like, oh yeah, let's send Frankie the temperature we're currently at.
Oh god.
And I think at one point on
Yeah.
Facebook is all like, I get it. It's warmer everywhere it is, except for
Yeah,
Chicago.
I do that to my mom sometimes now. I'm like, hey, how's the weather out there? And then I'll send her a screenshot of the temperature.
It's about 80 degrees today. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, she's like, yeah, it's in like 40s.
I feel like the only bad thing about California, right, is that like in other places, right, you get all 4 seasons, and then here it's just like hot,
And then cold.
somewhat hot, cold.
Yeah,
So-
I actually miss the seasons for sure.
Yeah. Doesn't feel right.
Doesn't, like for me, I'm like, it should be snowing by now, but it's like 90 degrees. Like,
Yeah.
I hate it so much.
So earthquakes and temperatures just all like,
Yeah.
just have a winter house in Big Bear or something.
I want to go up to Big Bear so bad. I miss snow, dude.
You need to go to Big Bear or Mammoth Mountain. Those places are great in the winter.
Or
Yeah, I
do
wanna go for Christmas.
or do what I recklessly did and try to hike in the
No, you don't get stuck up in a mountain by yourself and hitchhike down the mountain,
That's how
okay?
you die, bro. That's how you die.
Have
Well,
you
at
not
least
seen
I-
any horror movies in Halloween?
I still
That's how you die.
you know
Right.
the true horror is our elections. And going back to that,
It
going a little bit
is. To
back
bring
to
us
that.
full circle.
Full circle. So there's been a lot of talk about how people vote, and in this election, there has been this thought that people are picking kind of like a moral high, like on a moral level, and you would think, given that idea and given the polling, that would be the case in this election. And I think what I'm trying to ask y'all, what were your ideas when you were going into and mailing in your ballot? What was in your mind? And you don't need to answer who you voted for, but if you're comfortable enough, that's totally entirely up to y'all.
I'm an open book politically, man.
You go first. Callie, you go first.
For me, like I like voting.
Mhm.
I'm like a little civic duty nerd, and I'm like, really excited to vote. And I know like our whole generation is like so like we feel disenfranchised and voting doesn't matter. But for me, like the first time I voted, I was so excited, and
Mhm.
obviously that was 2016. So you'd be surprised to know that I'm still excited about voting. But I like to get my ballot, and I like to, like, they send you the little information booklet and I like to look through it, and then I like to go online and I look at Ballotpedia, and I go to the individual candidates websites and I do my research, and I really enjoy doing that. I feel like it's like a pleasant part of the experience.
Mhm.
I don't, like, after 2016, I'm pretty firmly like progressive, and after 2016 I'm thinking like it I was so stunned by that election that I try not to feel too confident in any area anymore, because we were so sure, like me and my family, my sister and everything, we were so sure that like Trump wouldn't win, like there's no way it would happen. And when he did, it was just like, so like, it was such a blow that in this election, I was thinking like, after the past 4 years, like you would think people would not vote for him, just because of everything that's happened, the way he's
Mhm.
handled it, etc. But it being so close is like kind of another blow.
Mhm.
It's not unexpected, but it's just like, how, like, why? You know what I mean? Like, why are people choosing to vote for the man who's done so much? You know what I mean? But
Mhm.
I mean, it makes sense to some people, because that's, I guess there's just things like, what's gonna change their minds? Like, they're firmly in the Trump camp, so like, what can he do that will make them not be? And I
Mhm.
guess we haven't passed that threshold somehow.
Yeah.
Um, so I felt really optimistic. I was scared because my ballot wasn't coming, and I was really excited to finally get it and fill it out. But I cast it with hopeful, like I was hopeful, but now I guess it's not that surprising.
Mhm.
How it's turning out. It's depressing and it's anxiety inducing, but it's just not that surprising to me anymore, I guess.
Yeah.
Kalani?
Sorry to end that on such a negative
No,
note.
no, don't worry. Well, I think we're all feeling the funk right now, and
Yeah.
I feel the same way. I think I tend to lean left on many subjects. I'm what folks may consider centrist by nature, because I do have a lot of friends that kind of view themselves as more conservative. And I still keep in touch because I figured, they probably, like, we have a lot of highly, and like, I wouldn't say super loud, shouting matches or anything, but we all try to bring in points here and there, and everything. So in terms of how I feel, like, as a person of color, this current administration doesn't, identify with me, especially when, sorry, Kalani. I think I was gonna shout it out to you, but I'm gonna take the floor, and then I'll leave it to you. But
I don't mind. I like
yeah,
listening to this stuff, so this is no big deal to me.
I think for me personally, yeah, as much as people are yelling and saying like, yes, it's a cultural thing and stuff like that. Yeah, I personally don't necessarily identify with this individual, the way he
Yeah.
been talking about this virus in racialized terms. I don't like that. The way he scapegoats other individuals, the other, and what is considered other is usually black and brown people. And
Mhm.
there are a case to be made for Dems that, the idea that they could nominate Kamala Harris and think, oh, we are entitled to the people of color vote. The exit polls don't acknowledge that right now, because apparently a lot of people of color, especially men, are gravitating towards Trump for whatever reason. We don't know until maybe months, maybe years down the line. But
Right.
in terms of at least this current president, he, on the basis of the way he's been dealing with this whole coronavirus thing, and I feel like it's been kind of the talk of the town ever since March, and now that it's like today, just today, 100,002 reported cases of coronavirus, and on
I
top of
was gonna
all
bring
the
that up too.
election news, like this pandemic, um, regardless of how a person feels, where it came from, what's it's called, you would think this would bring people together. But no, he used this as a political tool to divide, and I'm just not comfortable with that. And I voted because of that. And of course, as a Californian, there's other ballot measures and things like that. And I've been saying this every single time a podcast was involved with politics, is that if you absolutely don't like Trump and you also absolutely don't like Biden, just vote anyways. You could leave that president thing blank if you wanted to, because there's so
Right.
much on the line on a local level and on a state level that you need to vote for. And I can go a little bit deeply on like the different ballot measures for California, but me going into and dropping off my ballot, that's what I was feeling in my head when I filled out that whole thing and sent it in at my city hall area.
Yeah. On sorry to interrupt you, but like on the COVID thing, like uh there was an article I saw on NBCLA about how the areas that have been hit hardest by the virus are voting overwhelmingly for Trump. And I was like, why?
I read about that too. It's insane.
Like, that's mind blowing to me. That doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that?
Well, I would feel that the only way that makes sense is that the idea that you are for this president and you will not take this pandemic seriously. Therefore, that's where the numbers coincides. I don't know if it's causation and correlation here. That's
Yeah.
that famous conversation there. But just looking at the demographics that refuse to take it seriously, the pandemic seriously, it tends to fall on the party lines. And it seems so weird to me.
Yeah.
You like when we had a pandemic previously, I don't think that we were as this divided before. I'm not a historical scholar when it comes to the Spanish flu or the influenza of 1918, but I don't think that there was necessarily an election. At best, you had all these people wanting to celebrate the end of the world, the World War, and mostly considered like, hey, let's get let's keep businesses open. I think that's about it. So I think maybe this is just a new thing. I don't know what's going to happen at this point, because it just you would think that sorry.
You would think, right?
It's just a very divisive time right now between parties, I would say, honestly. Okay, personally speaking though, but I only started voting probably maybe 2 or 3 years ago, right? But the one memory that stands out in my head the most is that in the first election I voted in, which was the election with between Trump and Hillary Clinton, as soon as Trump won, I remember going into my class at university, and my professor was crying.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see, I walked into a class and there were just people looking very dejected and just crying and being upset. And, that stands out in my memory as a big thing. Because even for me, after hearing about all the stuff that he talked about, it was just kind of why would I feel happy that he got elected,
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And then not even to mention that probably a day or two later, he implemented the whole travel ban thing that happened, which didn't make it any better. But going back to the whole discussion with how there are a lot of places that are strongly affected by COVID that somehow seem to lean towards more Trump votes. It just seems kind of baffling to me that happens. There's also a high amount of Latino voters who voted for Trump, and a good percentage of LGBTQ people who voted for Trump as well, which seeing as how he's put a Supreme Court justice who doesn't agree with LGBTQ politics, as well as just things that contradict, all of these things that are ingrained with these people. How could you support something like that and be okay with it and think that it wouldn't affect you? I don't know.
Yeah, it just seems he built something to just instead of bringing people and working together, it's like it's a political party of using groups of individuals against each other.
Yeah.
It's not coalition building. It's just basically, showing off as if you're always going to be this the idea of success, and he built a campaign on the idea of success. And honestly, probably the only thing that he's done that's probably successful, and I'll give him credit for that, is his show. Literally, everything else is, and that's the thing. That's endemic of his campaign. It's an image. He's probably the best salesman as far as we know. He sells his image. He sells his self idea to the public, and I think we need to figure out a way why it captures the imagination in that way.
Yeah,
like when we're
I'm not
here,
into
yeah.
reality TV, so I'm just like I hate that about him, but I guess people really are into that. Like people like that whole thing, like that whole shtick is like so appealing to people.
Yeah. And like the only thing that really captures the imagination of like progressives and Dems are like these younger individuals. I got to the point where I was like, holy shit, there's people like Andrew Yang that exists in the world, and like AOC, and like all of these individuals that like actually talking about issues in the community. And I'm sure that, because I live in a bubble, of like a pseudo echo chamber, and I can I can admit that. I'm sure that there's a lot of conservatives that's really talking about the issues. Like I think the Wisconsin governor took COVID seriously, and like, listen, he's like the one of the only Republican governors that actually have positive numbers in his term, as like the approval numbers, and he took it seriously. And so I'm sure that there's conservatives that are trying to do the right thing, but it just seems so weird that he sold people on this idea at 2016. They bought it, and then now the party is coalescing around him. So like whatever the Republican Party was in the 2000 to 2016 era, I don't know. I don't think it's considered really the party of working class Americans. I think it's a party of Trump at this point. So that's just how I feel. And I'm going to get flamed in the comments, and this channel hasn't really got an audience. Yeah, dig this up for later.
Like, I think a lot of Republicans were anti-Trump in his early days, and I think like to support him now, you have to have compromised your own views a lot. Like you have to have reconciled your own views with what he's doing, and like chosen to support him over your own views. Like for a lot of Republicans, because his approval rating wasn't always very high, but you still have so many Republicans who are I read an article, and I can't remember what state it was in, but a man who died of COVID last month won a seat on his city council.
I heard that too.
Yeah, and he described himself as a Trump Republican, and I was like, that's really interesting that you have Republicans and you have Trump Republicans now. Like he's dividing even his own party. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh my God. I hope, if Arizona is any indication, is like the whole bagging on McCain and stuff like that, and like Arizona, you don't hurt anybody that came from Arizona, and especially a Vietnam War hero like John McCain. So I think individuals in Phoenix, and I do know there is a lot of people moving from California into these states like Nevada and Arizona, and that's an issue on its own. But hopefully that messaging comes from Arizona flipping, is because Trump just totally screwed up. Why would you bag on veterans, and B, King veteran John McCain? Sorry, a little rant, and and to the point of how I feel personally on this election is like, I feel like it shouldn't be this close. Almost,
it shouldn't.
Yeah. Like, there, for the case for conservatives, for the case for the GOP, it's like they could have shown that they give a shit about coronavirus, and they would have won by a landslide. Literally, they would have won by a landslide. Taking this pandemic seriously, they would have won. The fact that Joe Biden is basically winning on the idea of, hey, I am not Trump, and I will make sure people feel whole because of coronavirus. It's like, I can't believe we've got to this point. And you would think, like I said, you would think a pandemic would bring people together, but I guess not. And
Well,
now we're having
what?
Yeah.
Sorry.
You go first.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, it's crazy we live in a world where a pandemic, like a viral illness, is political. Like, it's a viral illness. How do you even apply politics to that?
Yeah.
The fact that like masks are politicized as well is just in itself like, how did you make masks into a political issue? I don't understand. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think the reason why Trump is doing so well despite his response to COVID is because of just like how different his like talking points about COVID are, and how it just, you get so many different messages from different places that I think there are a lot of people that are, I guess in the phrase, lost in the sauce. And they're just like, seems like he's right. Might as well listen to him, Like, he seems very confident in what he's saying. And I think the fact that he's confident in whatever comes out of his mouth, even though he can contradict himself within like the next day or so.
Yeah.
Just makes it makes more right? Yeah, it just makes people feel like they can believe him because he just has that assertiveness, and he
says what people want to hear.
Exactly. Yeah. And then
it doesn't matter if he acts on it. Like.
Yeah.
I wonder if that bar is so low. Maybe I should get into politics.
Right? Like, if that's what people want.
Yes, it's like at this point,
if
like
that easy.
Yeah, if it's that easy, like anybody could do it. Maybe that's a good or bad thing, to be honest. And
it's
like
time to get lost in the sauce.
Yeah, and then when people say like, "Oh yeah, but like Reagan wasn't a politician; he was an actor." It's like, no, he had years in the Screen Actors Guild.
Yeah,
he was in some form of politics before he broke into politics, as the governor of California. So it's just
he
like,
didn't just sprout president, like.
yeah, like there was a path for Reagan. There was a path for, say, Jimmy Carter. Like there's a reason why people go into politics.
Yeah, they come from somewhere, but Trump just. Like
it's like a bat out of hell.
No, he's just Miley Cyrus on a wrecking ball.
Oh my god, I'm sure somebody has a deep fake of that.
Oh,
I feel like I've seen one.
I feel like I have two.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't think we ever got to did we ever got to Kalani and how she voted, or like, no, like what was in your mind when you voted? That was a initial question.
I don't know. So actually, I was surprisingly very into looking up the props this time around, and I think like a lot of the times before, I was very confused about the propositions because of how they're worded, and I still was confused now. Don't get me wrong, but it's like doing the research and understanding it, and kind of like being able to read the propositions and be able to put like an opinion on it. Even though, it might change depending. It felt good to be able to have a word on it. Granted, a lot of stuff went through that I'm just kind of, some things went through and I was just like, I don't know if that was a good idea. But besides the point. So propositions to me were very interesting. But when it came to like candidates and stuff like that, I think aside from like the presidential elections, like the other ones kind of sometimes you feel a little confused about because you have to do your own research and understand it a little more. And I think that was probably the hardest part that I had in terms of just filling in my ballot, which was like, who am I necessarily voting for? And am I making a good choice by choosing this person over another person?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Through
feel
like
like
judges and stuff like that.
mhm.
Yeah,
Literally
exactly.
for information.
You're just like, well, you seem all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You get to go.
But
Like I agree with this kind of.
sounds good to me. But aside from that, I think like over the past couple of years, I think I have felt a sense of like disenfranchisement when it comes to elections.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't help that I'm a part of the demographic that doesn't vote a lot anyways, but like, it's just, when you see how things are going and then you understand that like there is a great majority of people who are in your age group that don't vote, it becomes a little more understandable as to why it feels like you're disenfranchised, because the results of what you feel like are the right decision don't exactly get conveyed because the amount of people don't turn out as much as other age groups and stuff like that.
Yeah,
So,
it's like a toxic cycle. Like, oh, but I'm not gonna vote because my vote doesn't matter. But then like no one votes, so yeah, of course your vote doesn't matter because you didn't vote.
exactly, yeah.
It just seems like this thing, like ever since Nixon, this idea is like, oh, we'll build the Young Vote Coalition, but the issues I find there is that when you see the people in power at like a certain age, and I know this is definitely probably an ageist conversation, but when you see so many people that are above the average age of 65 and you feel like they're making policies for them and they're not bringing the bacon to how you're feeling, or constantly making bullshit articles about millennials and
Yeah.
how to devalue, like how like not addressing decades of minimum wage like suppression, or how colleges got exorbitant prices and like the
Yeah.
actual effectiveness of that education doesn't expand. Like what Andrew Yang said, is like you have a gerontocracy, you have a rule by old people that may not have the same interest in heart for the younger individuals that do the everyday work. Like, to the idea that young people are lazy, that is a fucked up conversation. If you try to consider yourself in that same boat, you have thousands of dollars of debt, you have out of school, if you're a lawyer and doctor, you have mountains of debt, so it's like, how are you going to get yourself out of that? And and the only people that seems to galvanize any form of a young vote are young candidates.
I think it makes sense that way. Like you want to see someone who looks like you because they live a more similar life to you, and they're gonna fight for you in political sphere, more aligning with what you want. Like that's why local elections are so important, because if you want to see people that look like you have to vote, or else the people who vote are the older people, and then what are you gonna have? Like you can't be upset that nobody's representing you when you chose not to vote for somebody who would represent you. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And as much as what happened to the Voting Rights Act in like I think 2015, and like we're seeing the seeds of that happening now, where less ballot places are opening, and like even where even factoring coronavirus in, there were still lower polling places available for people to vote, and in areas where they're trying to suppress people of color votes. And my thing there, even with these extraneous cases, you still have a situation where I think there's a mayor in Georgia that got elected, and she had COVID twice. She understood being evicted, being a person that's been evicted, lived on the streets for a little bit, and like understanding, hey, we need to do something for our community. Like there's people like me that's gone through some shit, and we're saying, oh, you work hard, you got 2 jobs, but you still can't make ends meet. Like, what are you really trying to say to people at that point?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like though, right?
God, get a better job then. Like, okay.
I mean, I think there is like a wave of young people that are showing up in at least like this election though, and I think like politically there are a lot of younger people that are coming up, and
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe it was that the reason for like the lower turnouts in young voters was because there was nothing to necessarily, I don't know, galvanize them in a way, lack of better word. And, you know, I think if you look in history's past, you know, there were a lot of these kind of like movements that encouraged people to vote. And I think for a long time, you know, we kind of hit a place where we were kind of in a good, like in a mediumly, at least accurate, not accurately, but like a decent place where nothing was really happening. And, you know, I think with the advent of Trump becoming our president, that's changed a lot of the narratives that have been happening. And, you know, I think it says a lot that, you know, the squad got reelected. There are more people that are following into the squad with like Ilhan Omar, AOC. You know, you have Greta Thunberg, who's, you know, fighting for climate change. And, you know, there's a, like, oh God, I think there's an LGBTQ senator that got elected for Hawaii. Like, so I think
the first openly trans senator got elected too.
Yeah.
Awesome to see, you know.
Exactly. So I think there is an advent of these younger political figures that are coming in order to represent, you know, all these people. And even like, you know, if you think about like some of the bigger names like AOC, right? You know, she was like a bartender for a while and then she got elected into her position. So I think, you know, I think it's an example of people that may have similar backgrounds to just everyday people becoming put into these positions, and they seem to be remarkably young as well. So, you know, I think there's a time coming for that. It's coming in slow waves, but it's coming.
Yeah, we're heading in that direction. It's what it seems like, and that's so beautiful to see. Like they're hot. Like I wish I had like a list of all the different like you know landmark elections that happened this year. Like the bright spots. But I didn't pull it up before we started. But a lot of good things did happen. Even if this election is close, like a lot of people did vote. Like a lot of young people, a lot of people of color.
Isn't this year like the biggest in younger voter turnout? I'm gonna look it up. Actually,
Biden has the biggest turnout like of all
any
time,
president.
Of any election.
To your point, Cal, the although it doesn't look like it on paper, there's been so much like progressive ballot measures, amendments, propositions on the ticket this year that got passed. You know, I think 4 states just legalized marijuana, and I think 1 legalized for medical use. You know, I think New Jersey, Montana, was it Oregon?
I don't know. Oregon legal.
Well, they already did
for drugs, and I think that's really cool to see.
Yeah. I was on the fence.
Different opinions about that, but
I was on the fence on the whole legalizing mushrooms, but until I actually learned more about them and how much it's being used.
For therapeutic use, right?
Yeah, and like how it's being used for servicemen and women to address PTSD issues. So it's just like, oh, you know what? If that's a way and there's actual data to back it up, I'm like, let's. If it's helping people, why wouldn't you? And then in Florida, and as much as Florida just still keeps being red,
Florida's just Florida.
Florida being Florida. Yeah, blame it on Florida. Did you just say that or okay?
This is off topic, but have you ever tried to Google the current date and Florida man?
The current date and Florida man?
Yeah, have you never heard?
There was like a tweet that like I don't know if it was last year or this year, but like you Google your birthday in Florida man, you get your own specific Florida man.
Yes.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to look at that later.
It's a lot of fun.
It's a great Florida man. What is it? Rabbit hole to fall into.
Yeah, but... it's like an interactive.
it's actually an interactive map.
Basically, yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah, like we all get to share an experience.
Just Florida Man 365. Oh shoot, I lost my thought. Oh wait, no. Going back to Florida. Florida just voted in to raise the minimum wage by 2026.
It's $15, right?
Yeah, to $15. And like so, like as much as we want to be doom and gloom, there like on a policy level, I think people are voting on policy, and I don't know. I feel like Dems are making this culture war argument about Trump, but people are still, like, hey, my wages hasn't gone up. What the hell, or
Yeah.
um, you know, like my family member got arrested for a small drug offense and a non-violent one at that, and we just recently decriminalized marijuana. So it's like, what the hell? Like, can I have my family back? You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Right.
or in the case of California, it's like, I believe in restorative justice. I believe that if you do your time in America's court and in America's jail, you should have your rights back, and we just did that here in California.
Oh, I'm really happy about that one. That one made me so happy that it passed.
People are sharing that, like, a lot of non-Californians are sharing that they don't like. I think a lot of people don't realize that people who serve their sentence already had their rights restored to vote, but we just expanded that to people who are currently on parole. Before, it was only for people who had already finished their parole. But that's a lot more people who have their right to vote restored, and that's always a good thing. Like, I
Hmm.
recently started caring about this a lot, like in the last 2 years, but like, I think that if you commit a crime, it doesn't make you not a citizen. And if
Mm-hmm.
we make money off of prisoners' backs, and things like the volunteer firefighters and stuff like that, like, you deserve to have your rights. Like, you don't lose your rights because you committed a crime. Like, that's how I feel. So I really like to see more people regain their right to vote. Like, I
Yeah.
think that's really important.
For me too, and this hits a more of a personal note. And like, when many Cambodians immigrated to the U.S. and especially in the Long Beach area, there wasn't a lot of services for that area. Not a lot of school programs, not a lot of things that catered towards the community to keep people off gangs. And you have a
Yeah.
situation where there are community members that has done their time, but because of what happened post 9/11, you have a situation where people that were formerly incarcerated has done their time, but because they were formerly incarcerated, they can't get their citizenship. And then on top of that, because of fear of the other, because of the fear of the immigrant, and if you have a history, you'll get deported. And I'm just like, as a person that has this restorative justice feel, that says, like, if you've done your time, then you completed your debt to society. And these individuals aren't like hardcore gang members. Some of them are people that just want to have their life again. That's like,
Hmm.
I fucked up, and I get I get a second chance, but now because of circumstances out of my control, they get deported on that
Right.
basis because they have a record and
Yeah.
because there's a reasonable suspicious. And that this is something that I feel like the Cambodian community hasn't really like catched on to, especially for conservative Cambodian communities. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
just like, okay, yeah, you robbed a liquor store at the age of 16 and you've done federal time for that. And like, you've built your life post jail. You have a kid, you have a wife, you have a family, you have taxes, you have bills to pay, and you'll still get deported. What
Yeah.
type of justice is that? And personally, that's how I feel as a Cambodian American. That's one of the biggest thing. And when there's a ballot that talks about restorative justice, it's like that, I'm all for it, for
Yeah.
making people feel whole again when they want to make like a tangible change in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sorry, I gone to a place where I don't often go to in these podcasts.
no, but honestly, restorative justice, I think, is very important. Like, at that point, you've served all the time. I'm pretty sure at like what it basically entails is if you put in the effort to change yourself, right? I think you should get the ability to be able to vote. You should be able to not be, like 1/3 of a citizen just because you made a mistake when you were young. And
Mm-hmm.
to be able to have the ability to enact that change, I think, is very important, especially giving it back to the people who originally made that mistake, I think, is very important as well. So when that when that ballot passed and I looked at the news, I was just like, ah, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was really happy about that one.
we can't get everything in California like affirmative action, but yeah, we got at least that.
That one was a good one. That one,
That was a good one. We actually didn't get rent control, by the way, localized rent control.
Yeah, we voted against renters' rights, workers' rights.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie. The one that pissed me off the most was the Uber Lyft one.
Yeah, I think everyone's the most pissed off about that one because we are telling corporations that they can buy their own legislation,
Mhm.
and that just doesn't set a great precedent. Like,
How much money
We
they
should-
spent, by the way,
I heard it
on
was
that?
about 2 million. I heard it was,
Was it
2
2
million.
I thought it was like 20 million or something.
We can check. I'm gonna fact check it right now.
Yeah, it was
'cause
an
they just kept
exorbitant
pouring money
amount.
into it too.
Yeah. So, going back to the larger election at hand, continue to fact check that. How is everybody feeling now at this current moment at 9 o'clock on a
Stressed.
Wednesday night?
I have $205 million together. They've spent that much.
205 million. So it's not 2 million. It's not 20 million. It's
It's not 20.
Two-
205.
2 and 2 zeros, and then another
Yeah.
6 zeros after that.
Yeah, that's from Business Insider. That's ridiculous, and we let them get away with it. But I think it was worded really confusingly. Like yes to exempt. Like a lot of people said it was a classic like yes means no, no means yes type of thing.
Mhm.
I was surprised because it passed pretty heavily in the favor of yes. So I was like, I really thought, like every time I saw one of those ads, and God, the ad's so annoying. But every time I saw one, all the comments were like, no on 22, no on 22, and
So I
it
have
passed,
checked.
so-
I have the numbers.
Oh, do you do?
So apparently, according to this article, they spent $188 million for advertising for yes on Prop 22, and
180.
spent $15 million against it.
Oh, so the no on 22.
Is only 15 million compared to 188 million dollars.
Okay, that's still a lot of money. That is still a lot of money.
This is supposedly, according to this article, the most expensive proposition in California's history.
I thought that was another one, but they probably surpassed it because they kept pouring money into this.
Yeah, in total for this proposition, there was a total of $204 million contributed to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think, it says a lot that those ads worked.
And also,
Yeah.
it's also tough because given if it was a year without COVID, maybe it might have had a chance.
Yeah.
And how gig work is probably the easiest work to get right now. I guess people are voting on that versus workers' rights at this current moment.
It just sucks. There was a story the LA Times ran the other day about a man. He worked for Uber, I think, and he worked 80 hours a week, and he died from COVID. And he
Mhm.
was the breadwinner for his family, and so his family went to California and they requested like compensation, workers' compensation, and they were denied because he was considered an independent contractor. So his family gets nothing, and we voted that they shouldn't get nothing. Basically, like the vast majority of people voted that they deserve to get nothing, essentially, and it just really bums me out. Like,
I
Mhm.
agree.
yeah, I was just really surprised to see it pass so heavily. Like, I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It only makes me more upset that with that proposition, right? Like by voting for it, we essentially made it so that all of these people who are now considered to be individual contractors don't get the health benefits and protections of being employees under these companies.
Right,
And
Mhm.
yeah. You can't even get unemployment if you can't drive like for them anymore, and it's like, why would you? I don't know. It's just really interesting seeing people vote against vote or workers' rights.
Yeah, I think as somebody like to suggest nobody has no bias and like preconceived histories that are tied to how they vote. As a person that got laid off and was part of a union, I'm just like, you know what? Like, companies shouldn't do that to their workers, or we shouldn't have a system where we have a tech giant, right? A tech giant dictating how people get paid or get
Yeah.
compensated for their work. And that's how I voted when it came to that. I'm just like, I may work in the public field, especially, my paycheck tends to be from public dollars and grants. I am always for workers' rights, and then, and
Yeah.
laid off twice. Well, once because mismanagement, and the other time because of coronavirus. I was just like, you know what? It's about making people whole in a time of crisis. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
The
that
fact,
was really disappointing.
yeah, it's just like people were left in the dust for no reason, and it was. I looked at the proposition, right? Originally, I'm not even gonna lie, I got confused by the wording, and then I looked.
It is really confusing. They did that on purpose.
I know, and then the only
They did that on
reason
purpose.
why I feel I was able to vote no was because I looked at who backed it, and all the Uber, Lyft driving companies supported yes, and I was like, that seems a little bit sus.
Yeah.
Yeah, when
I was
looking through
thinking.
the propositions, I had a graphic up that told me who backed yes and who backed no, and it played such a role in my decision on each one. And on that one, I was like, I checked like 8 times. Like, I am supposed to vote no, right? Like, that's what I want, right? Like, I was like, no means what I want it to mean, right? Like, I was so they did that on purpose so people would be confused, I think.
Yeah,
It's a good
sure.
thing to know where like the funding behind a proposition or a candidate is.
Definitely.
Like it's definitely good to know. It's like, oh, this is who they're backing and at this amount, and like it's good that those things are transparent. Trump. 4 years.
Oh,
and still haven't seen
God.
his taxes.
We've been gaslighted for 4 years.
Oh, like I'm being audited for the past 3 years. You don't know what happens.
Oh
It's
my God.
art.
I can't release my tax return. I was like, all right, bro.
It seems so insane to me, right? Like there have been so many different controversies that have come up, but like the fact that Trump only paid $750 in taxes when he's basically like this rich ass mogul, like, sorry, excuse my language, but
Yeah, and he claims like, oh, it was a filing fee. I don't even know what that was. And everyone's like, you don't pay like a filing fee like that, bro. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what you think is going on.
And then,
yeah,
and then also it's like, as much as I was also in an indictment on Trump, is like, what I reminded like both either students and like family members that would say that, it's like, this is what rich people do. They find
Yeah, that's-
expensive lawyers to skirt tax laws.
yeah.
And
that's the idea.
and I think if anything, if there's any indication with what's going on with Trump, it's just that he's just another rich person. A billionaire might be a stretch, but at least a millionaire that skirts tax laws. And I think that's probably I think that would be the biggest thing. Whether or not he owes money towards any governments or whatever, that's secondary to me. It's the fact that he can skirt laws to make his benefit. There should be an indictment on how rich people has been doing that sort of thing for basically since Reaganomics.
Right, yeah. And people, like, he's supposed to, like, the Republicans are supposed to, represent, like, the working man. And I'm like, he doesn't represent you. He is nothing like you.
Yeah.
My friend was talking to me, like, she sent me a screenshot from something her friend said and said, like, looks like Biden's gonna win RIP my taxes. And I was like, do they make $400,000 a year? Because the whole misconception that everyone's taxes are gonna get messed up, like, they're not. It's not for everybody, guys. You're broke. Like,
Yeah.
no, the memes about it are so funny though. Like if you I can't even remember them, but like if you shake the gas pump when you're getting gas, like don't worry about Biden's tax plan. Like you're not the one it's for. Relax.
It just doesn't make sense that like, or at least like from how things have turned out, to me it doesn't make any sense that Republicans argue that they are for the working class when clearly the evidence it's like you're basically, the Republican Party is essentially made for like millionaires and rich people, like
Well, it can be said maybe at one point it was. Maybe.
Right. Yeah. It's
Maybe at
evolved,
one
but,
point.
like,
It just turned
people
into
aren't
this current
keeping up with it.
Yeah.
But
And
even then, right? Like I think being a Trump Republican is very much different from being like
that's also
a Republican, you know? So
the senators that drank the Kool-Aid, right? Who was it? Mitch McConnell?
you know what? I will say this.
Honorable.
I will say this
We're
though.
gonna do it.
I personally think, right? Because when Trump was first running for election, right, there were a whole bunch of Republican senators that were like, you know what, I don't support him. And then at this point, they either followed that statement or they doubled down and said, I do support him, right? And it's like, are you just saying that because you want to be saying that because he's in power now, or do you genuinely believe that? Sure, sure, Jan.
Right, like, you flip on yourself. Like, what's like? Where did that come from? That you all suddenly are in favor of Trump, who's bastardizing your party? Like, why?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Ted Cruz's of the world. He said so many bad things about the guy. I was just like, I can't imagine.
Yeah, people dunk on Cruz so hard because like all the terrible things like Trump said to him, and then he's always like licking his boots, and we're always like, all right, Cruz, keep it up.
Calm down, calm down. So